Let us be real clear. This is gonna get woo-woo as fuck. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of these incredible panels watching today. Hi, Jay. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Intuition.
Let's talk about it. What was that?
I said, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. I mean, I'm so curious just to hear from you to start thinking about how you define intuition.
Ooh, how do I define intuition? So, this book that I worked on, it's an anthology. We have some incredible authors that contributed pieces to it. Everyone from Samantha Irby to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Amy Poehler, the wonderful America Ferrera that we just saw in that amazing post-row panel. My mom, who's a public school teacher in California. I was really fascinated about looking at this other part of our intellect, something that has been left out of the conversation and has actually just been generally associated with sort of woo-woo mysticism, a form of spirituality, or something that is not really attainable, like something that we wouldn't actually be using in a purposeful way in our everyday lives. And so I wanted to explore that more, and the more that I researched it, the more that I found that intuitive intelligence is a huge, important tool that we are not using because we have been conditioned throughout history, most especially women and marginalized people, to think of it as something that is a deterrent, that is not something helpful. Our emotional intelligence is something that gets in the way of our work, of our lives. So to me, when I think about the definition of intuition, when I think about intuitive intelligence, I think about this connection between the body, the physical intelligence that we can harness and that we have, connected with rational thought. And when those things are working together, instead of fighting each other, but fighting together, we can open up a whole other kind of weaponized intelligence that we can use against an oppressive world. And so to me, that is the conversation of the book.
I love that. I love thinking about intuition as another type of intelligence, another type of knowing. And we're in a moment, too, where we're being conditioned to not trust all of our instincts, all of our knowings. For example, it's a beautifully warm day in November, and we're just like, are we cool with this? I guess so. But like, we all know that's not right. We all know this is not right. And so what do we do with that information?
I mean, I could have never expected this book when I was working on it last year that it was going to come out. It came out this last month in October. It was going to come out during a time just after the Dobbs decision was made and Roe v. Wade was overturned, and during a time when it is louder than ever that trans children, family members of trans kids, our trans community, they don't know their bodies. They don't know what's right for their bodies. Only the government knows what's right for their bodies. Same goes for women of color, everyone in the LGBTQ community. There is this real large-scale language that's being used to other us from our experience and other us from our intuitive understanding of who and what we are and how we're allowed to live in this world. So I make a real argument for us to resensitize ourselves to what the body tells us, to the connection between the gut, what your gut instinct tells you, and what your mind is telling you, because it is sort of a lost form of intelligence that we could be using in this moment. But it takes real practice to get there. That's one of the things that I learned, again, in some of the essays that I wrote in the book and some of the things that other people were writing, was that it's like a muscle, right? And in order to really understand how to trust that muscle, how to trust what the body and the brain are telling you when they're in connection with each other, it takes time. It takes a certain kind of learning and trust in that muscle in order for you to see its full effects in your life.
Yeah, I want to hear more about learning to strengthen that muscle and fine-tune that ability to listen to the self, because I think for many of us, or at least I'll just say for myself, when I hear my intuition pop up, a lot of the times I'm sort of inclined to ignore it or be like, I'm being silly, or that's not real, or like, you just got to go, or you've got to keep moving forward. It's really hard to listen to that inner voice. So I'm curious to hear a bit more about some of the ways that you're allowing yourself to listen, and then some of the moments that it's really been, you've been like, oh, I'm so glad I listened to that inner voice.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what this conversation aims to do is say none of us are perfect. None of us are going to get it right 100% of the time. Even those of us who have worked on this muscle, who are very in tune with what our intuitive selves have to say about the outside world and about our choices in this world. But it's important to sort of create mechanisms and ways to protect yourself when you feel yourself falling into old patterns of distrust with what that voice is telling you. There's a beautiful essay in the book by writer Jessica Valenti, who wrote to me one of my favorite sentences in the book, where she says, and she talks a lot about having a hard time trusting her intuition. And is it intuition or is it anxiety, right? Which women and marginalized people have been conditioned to confuse.
Right.
And to not know which one is which. That has been a cycle of our oppression for generations. And so what Jessica says is, when I can't trust my own intuition, I trust my community. And I think that's such a beautiful sentiment, to think of it as something that is both inside of you, but also that when you surround yourself with people who understand who you are, who understand what is probably true for you and want to help uphold it and support you in that endeavor, that in and of itself is sort of another safety net and another protective form over the muscle to say, keep flexing it. Even when we're not sure, find the people around you that are sure, because they know you and they love you and they understand you deeply, your flaws, every part of you. So that's, I think, another aspect of the intuitive conversation that to me is really fascinating.
Are there moments that you look back and you're like, I should have trusted my intuition on that? Yeah.
Boy, there's so many things I look back at. For me, especially growing up as an actor in the entertainment business, I could look at a lot of the years I spent really beating myself up for not being able to put out there in the world the authentic version of myself that I felt needed to be out there. And so what that looked like for me was somebody who wrote books, who directed films, who produced things, who wasn't just an actor for hire, who wasn't just an object of the entertainment business. But I think for me, I sort of, that my understanding and my ability to become that person was a part of my intuitive journey, was saying, I'm not going to get there right away. I'm not going to reach my full potential immediately. None of us are. But by leaning into it a little bit at a time, by trusting your gut, by every day doing something that scares you a little further, a little further, a little further, until you know on the other side of it, this feels wrong to me. I feel a physical tightness. I feel a ringing in my ear. I feel a tingling. I feel cold. You feel something that is a literal physical manifestation of that intuitive flag going up. And the more you can lean into that and trust it, which I think is what I had to do for so many years, again, having been conditioned to be an object for a living and to just really ignore my own voice and ignore what my own physical body was telling me. Also, because when you're an actor, you're just playing other characters all the time. You're telling your central nervous system all day, every day, since I was 11 years old, you have been kidnapped, you've been raped, you've been drugged, you're in love with this person, you're a party animal, you're a drug addict. When you tell your body that, your mind knows it's not true, but maybe your body doesn't. That is a form of trauma that I look forward to researching and looking into more. But all of these things I think add up, and for me, leaning into the process of my what my intuition has to say, of what my gut has to say, has taught me so much about the value of who I am and what I have to say and what the value of other people are and what they have to say.
When I think about intuition as well, you know, I think about the moments, not just the no's or the shoulds, but, you know, and maybe another way to say that is I think one can get really good at hearing a hard no in the body, hearing the like, actually, I'm not going to take the train, or like, you know what, I'm going to stay in, or I'm not going to go there, whatever it is. But I've been thinking so much lately about the yeses, the somatic yeses in our bodies, because it's just so much easier to hear the no's. But what are the moments when our bodies and everything inside of us is saying, yes, trust yourself? Because that's intuition also. Learning how to say, I don't exactly know what I'm doing, I don't exactly know what's going to happen, but I feel this is the right decision. Because we also live in a moment too where we're being conditioned and taught and told we can't trust ourselves to make these decisions and ourselves to figure out what's best for us. So I'm curious to hear more about the somatic yeses when they emerge as well.
Oh, well, the yes is, again, there's some really powerful, beautiful essays in the book. There's one by Dr. Mindy Nettifee, who is a depth psychologist and somatics practitioner who specializes in trauma on the voice. She talks a lot about leaving a marriage with a great guy who was really wonderful, who she was with for a long time, and the very difficult physical and psychological process she had to go through in order to leave. And even then, to have a voice inside you, to have your physical self say, this is right, you need to go. And then your brain, which is the flight or fight mechanism, it is the thing that kicks in when you ask a difficult question. And it says, no, we can't do that. We're not doing that. We cannot do that. X, Y, and Z, here's all the millions of reasons that we can't. And so I make a case that the muscle is the attempt, little by little, day by day, to override that immediate reaction of rational thought and to call in our brains and that intelligence towards the yes, towards the part of us that says, ooh, it's so scary. I am frozen with fear, but I still am going to go in this direction. Henry Miller said all growth is a leap in the dark. And I believe that's true. And I think part of this leaning into the yeses, and then when you get there and if you do it and you see what happens, even if you've failed or if you've succeeded, you've done it on your own time. You've done it with your own trust. And that cannot be discounted as something that is so valuable and so important towards us, becoming our most big, authentic selves.
I mean, like Rihanna always says, never a failure, always a lesson. And I always think about that too, right? Because there's something too, at least for me, so shameful about making a mistake. And if I trusted my intuition or I went on instinct and it wasn't right, then somehow I want to punish myself. And I'm really working on reframing it as like, you learned something, it's data, and you can move forward with that.
It's data, I quoted in the book, one of the most interesting facts that I found was from a psychologist and philosopher Gerd Gigerenzer, who's out of Germany, and he wrote a lot about how, when we think about rational thought and things we can control and understand, there's always a margin of error. No one in this room can unequivocally say that they are at the right job, that they are in the right partnership, that only that one person is the one for them and there is absolutely no margin of error whatsoever, that is it. Because that's not how, rational thought works, and there's always a small percentage that might not be true and that there might be something else. And so I make the case that our intuitive intelligence, which is a real form of knowledge, it is a real form of intelligence that manifests through the connection between the mind and the body, is that margin of error. That is the thing that we look at when we can't know all outcomes or all unknowns of any decision. That is the tool, that is the piece of the puzzle that we're missing and that we've been told shouldn't matter. And in the book, there's an essay that I wrote called Crossing Paths with Ghosts, and it looks at the oppression of women's intuition dating back to obviously women being burned at the stakes for hearing voices, but all the way through the advent of modern psychiatry, looking at the terms hysteria, things like that that were put upon people who heard voices or heard something, heard a calling inside. And so we can really see this through a historical lens, how this has happened through generations upon generations, leading to where we are now.
One of the things I really love about the anthology too is, there are a lot of essays by doctors and people who know the science. We started out this conversation talking about the woo and leading into the woo, but there is a lot of science around intuition. And I'm so curious to hear, was there anything that surprised you that wasn't covered in the process of making this book about how real intuition is?
There was some stuff that was sort of left on the cutting room floor, but I think also, and two of the essays that pop out to me are Dr. Nicole Appelian, and there's sort of two different aspects. Nicole Appelian is a survivalist. She's also a chemist and a biologist, and she's on that show, the second and third season of Alone, the survivalist show, and she's incredible. She's like the one that was out there living with grizzly bears, and she's like, "Hey bear, I'm gonna get the salmon today, not you, okay?" And somehow she was like fine and lived out there, with these crazy animals. And she talks a lot about the real, the gut-brain axis and the gut microbiome, and that scientifically it's now been proven that is another brain. It's another form of our knowing, of our knowledge, as important, again, as the rational thought. And so she talks much more about the scientific importance behind, your connection with nature and our connection to the earth as mirrors for connections to ourselves. And so hers is through a scientific but also holistic approach. And then the other one is from Dr. Dara Cass, who's I think actually here in the audience right now. Dara, are you here? She's somewhere. There. So Dara wrote this incredible essay, and she talks about, is it the doctor's gestalt? Am I saying it right? Okay. The doctor's gestalt, which is sort of like, the combination between that gut knowing, like when you have to make a quick decision about something in a medical emergency, you can have all the training in the world and you can have all the information, everything you have learned in medical school all along the way, but then at the end of the day, at the end of it, there is that margin of error, right? There's that little piece of your gut. And doctors know well, I think more than anybody, they have been trained to also understand and use that because they have to in emergency situations. So Dara writes about, being here in New York and being a part of everything from 9/11 as a student all the way through the last few years of COVID and what that's been like. So you can see two very interesting perspectives from the medical world and also from the scientific community talking about how real this is.
Wow, so deep. Somehow we've gotten to almost the end of this conversation, flew by, but we did want to try to do, a little exercise to help people strengthen their own intuition or maybe start to develop a daily practice or routine of thinking about their intuition that's also in the book. So I'm wondering if you're open to walking everyone through something.
I won't be able to walk you through a whole practice, but and if you end up at some point getting your hands on the book, that's awesome. There's a chapter in the end called The Roadmap Revealed, which is basically takes so many of the lessons that people wrote about in this book about their relationship with intuitive intelligence and puts it in the form of a sort of step-by-step guide for you to walk through asking yourself a difficult question or when a difficult decision needs to be made. So what I put to all of you today is try it at home. When you go home, when you need to ask yourself this question or when you need to have a conversation with yourself, find a quiet place. Find a place that feels safe, whether that's sitting under your favorite tree, in your backyard. Find something that is tuned out from the loudness of the world. Ask yourself the question and first see what the reaction is. See what rises up in you. What kind of fear? What is the immediacy of your brain and your rational mind telling you to run, telling you not to go with that? And no matter what the answer is that you come to, it doesn't mean you have to follow through with that. It's just an added piece of information that you now have. It is a choice that has been given to you about which direction to go in your life. And so then from there you can really decide and push further and sit with it. Sit with it for days, sit with it for weeks. Think about it. Being quiet instead of making a quick decision can sometimes be the best way to flex that muscle and to work towards it. That's about as much as I can say in going into the larger conversation, but I think starting there, really learning how to trust your gut and knowing that it's a process, knowing that it's a muscle to be worked on, that it's a tool that we can all use to fight fascism, to fight everything that we are going through right now in the political landscape. And sometimes the way to heal a profoundly sick world is to first heal ourselves and then gently and kindly help others to heal as well.
Beautiful. What a perfect note to end on. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much.